Today we're shooting at 100 yards, getting a couple reps in to round out 2024 and start 2025. We're just walking up to pull this last set here, that last section of arrows that you guys just saw me shoot. But one of my most commonly asked questions is, how do I get such long distances out of my sight tapes when I'm only shooting 266 feet per second? So today we're going to cover just that. Here's my 100-yard group to round out the year with the Mach 33. We're going to head back to the shop and we're going to talk about how I get the most distance out of my sight tape so that you guys can use this going into the off season to improve your archery game. See you in the shop. All right, y'all, we're back in the shop and we're going to talk about how I get the most distance out of my sight tape. And especially for you guys that are shorter draw length, heavier arrow weight, slower speed overall, this is going to be very, very important for you guys so that you can practice at those longer distances and use your pin. It's really as simple as a couple things. It's very, very important how you set your pins in your housing. So when I set my pins in my housing, I don't know if you guys can see this, but what I do is the first thing I do is I'm going to set my bottom pin as low as I feel comfortable in the housing. I shoot horizontal pins. If you're shooting a 2-pin fixed vertical, you're kind of SOL, you're at the mercy of it. The other thing you could do is put a glow-in-the-dark dot on the top of your bubble level and use that as a third dot. Now, I like mine roughly a 1/4 inch, a strong 1/4 inch, maybe a little bit more off the bottom of that bubble, just so I have enough space to see that pin. And so what I do is I set that pin up low in the housing, and that's my 40. So when I go to sight my bow in, I typically know roughly where my peep is going to be, but we'll fine tune that here in just a minute. So I'll set my peep at roughly where I think 60 is going to be. I'm going to shoot 20 and 30 just to get them close so I don't miss the target. And then I'm going to shoot 40, and I'm going to dial that 40 in by moving my housing, not the pin itself. Because I don't want that pin to come up anymore, because the higher that pin is in my housing, the less yardage I'm going to get out of being able to physically use my pin. So I'm going to set that pin where I want it, and I'm going to adjust the housing accordingly. Once I get the housing set, I'm going to set my lock block in on my spot hog, or I'm going to set my auto stop on a HHA or whatever sight you have. I'll set my stop block at that point. Then I'm going to go back, sight in 30, sight in 20, make sure those are good. And then we're going to start working our way out 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. And I'm going to go out and I'm going to find those marks. Once I find those marks, I'm going to make a note in my phone. Like usually I just throw random sight tape on and I just start backing it out until I hit. And then what I do, let's say I put sight tape number 4 on and 50 yards is number 13. In my phone, I'm going to do 50 yards is 13. If it's 13 and a half, then it's 13 and a half. And I'm going to write that in my phone notes, and I'm going to do 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, all the way out until I run out of clearance. Once I run out of clearance, I'm going to go back. I'm going to make a mock-up sight tape on Precision Cut Archery. And once I have my mock-up tape, this is where I start to gain a little bit more yardage. So now that I have a mock-up tape, I'm going to set that tape to 65, anywhere between 60 and 70. It depends how much distance I want to get out of my tape, but typically I do about 63, 64 yards. And then I'm going to come to full draw and I'm going to set my peep so that I'm in perfect alignment and that peep is perfectly covering that housing at 63, 64 yards. And then I'm going to tie my peep into that location. And then I'm going to go out and double check my sight tape. And typically I'm going to have to move my sight just a little bit to get everything to hit. And typically it's going to go up. So I'm going to end up, usually, if I set my peep perfect at 60 here, when I get out in my actual 60, I'm going to have to be just barely tucked in. And what that's going to do is that's going to allow me to be full contact, nose on the string, good form, all the way out to however far my tape will max out. And that allows me to have the most consistency at those longer distances. The reason I'm not too worried about having the string on the side of my nose for 20, 30, and 40, and even slightly at 50, is because you can pretty much get away with murder at 20, 30, and 40 as far as form goes. So for me, I like to set it up that way just so that, you know, I am going to be tucked a little bit at 20, 30, and 40. But that's okay, because I would rather be tucked at 20, 30, and 40 than to be floating off my string and not have a good, solid, multiple anchor points at 100, 115, 120. So currently I'm shooting 73 pounds, 70% let off with a 530 grain arrow at about 266 feet per second at 27 3/16 of a draw length. So I know guys that are hitting those 280s, 290s feet per second, and they're still not getting 100 yards out of their tape. So I'm making this video so that hopefully you guys can use a couple of these little tips and tricks that I use to help you guys get the most yardage out of your sight tape. But with that being said, that is the end of today's video. If you guys like videos like this, it really, really helps the channel if you guys would subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Peace.